Hi, this is your host Abdul Bhartia, and we are here at Open Source Summit in Vienna, Austria. And today we have with us Mike Bursell, Executive Director of Confidential Computing Consortium. Mike, it's good to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Nice to see you.
My pleasure to host you here today. First of all, let's talk about what is confidential computing.
Yeah, absolutely. So confidential computing basically allows you to run your applications, your sensitive applications and data on infrastructure which you don't necessarily trust. We've been doing encryption on the wire, on the network, or encryption and storage forever, right? But when you're actually running your application, it's vulnerable to malicious actors who are on that machine, who have taken it over, or maybe you've got an admin or something that you don't trust. Maybe you're on the cloud and you're in maybe a highly regulated industry, or you've got really sensitive data and you can't 100% trust your cloud provider. What confidential computing does is use hardware-based controls, and that's really important, in the chip to isolate your application and your data from everything else around it. So that's CPUs, GPUs, keeping your data isolated from everything else on that machine, whether it's a hypervisor, a kernel, or an admin, or just other workloads.
If I'm not wrong, the consortium is a couple of years old, 2019, as you mentioned before.
Yep.
How organizations were doing confidential computing in past?
Well, confidential computing really hasn't been around for very long. It's something which has only become mainstream over the last 5 or 6 years. And so as the hardware's become widely available, so it's now in Intel chips, in ARM chips, in AMD, in NVIDIA, IBM, those are the main chip providers. It's only really then that it's been possible. And as cloud has grown, everyone's using cloud obviously, people have realized that there are occasions when you've got too much to be doing in-house, or it's too expensive to do it in-house, but the stuff you want to put in the cloud, but how much can you trust it? What's the best way to protect your data, your customers' data? This could be patient data or credit card data or your internal data, your CEO's password, or I don't know, your CFO's pay packet, right? All of those things are things you may want to protect. And these days, confidential AI is another big thing as well. So it really wasn't something that could be done before now, but on the other hand, cloud hasn't taken off, and now they've come together as the chip companies and the cloud companies have realized how important this is. And pretty much every single cloud company now, you can go and you can use confidential computing.
When and why the consortium came to exist? What was the reason behind, or what is the role the consortium is playing? Because if the confidential computing is happening at the chip level, what is the role of the consortium?
So what's the role of the consortium? It's to promote the use of confidential computing in a variety of ways. Firstly, it's to let people know about it, because it's amazing how few people do know about it. Secondly, it's to work in the open source world, because of course we're part of the Linux Foundation. We have, I think, currently 13 different open source projects, and we're adding more as we go, which are part of the consortium in all different technical areas. But also we work with people like regulators, we work with standards bodies, and do a lot of technical work, putting out white papers, working with people like the IETF on definitions, on protocol. We work with other organizations in the similar space, like privacy enhancing technologies like homomorphic encryption. We look at things like quantum cryptography, how that's relevant to everything we do. So it's all areas of technical and sort of marketing and open source encouraging. So our goal is to promote confidential computing and open source. That's absolutely what we're about.
And now can you talk about the organizational structure of this consortium? What does it look like?
Yeah, sure. We are a minimum viable governance. So we try and keep it as thin as possible. So we've got the governing board, which is made up of the premier members, of whom there are currently 9, and a couple of representatives from the general members. And everything else is completely open for anyone to be. You don't even need to be a member of the organization to come along. We have a technical advisory council, which has 3 different special interest groups at the moment, one on attestation, one on governance, risk and compliance, and one on Linux kernel things. And we have the outreach committee as well, which is about promoting and organizing conferences and events and speaking and all those sorts of things as well.
And what is the output of the consortium? Do you create a standardization, a documentation, just bringing people together, or software also?
all those things really. We don't produce our own software. We help the open source projects to create the software. But we're working with standards bodies, we're working with regulators, putting out white papers, and education, a lot of education as well.
Is confidential computing like it's like a use case for almost everybody, or is it specific industries, specific use cases?
It's one of the tricky things actually to say what is the use case, because there's a use case in pretty much any industry you can come across. Obviously, heavily regulated industries like finance, where you've got financial data, or healthcare, or pharmaceutical. But you can think of everyone has sensitive data, whether it's credit card details or cryptographic keys, or one of my favorites. I was doing a birds of a feather conversation once at a conference, and someone came up to me, and they were a large pest control company, and I thought, what has pest control got to do with this? But they have confidential data. Their customers, they don't want people to know they have a pest problem. Maybe they have their customers' data. They've probably got sensitive commercial data, all of those things. So whether it's healthcare or we've got some space, we've got genomics data, and all of the obvious things. And anyone using AI has become a really interesting use case at the moment. So yeah, pretty much every sector.
Can you also cite, if possible, examples or incidents that happened where, like, if they were following confidential computing, that would have been avoided?
Yeah, we're always very careful to avoid specific examples, because that's a bit unfair on the people it's happened to. But pretty much any use case where data has been taken out of a cloud by someone who shouldn't have access to it, that's a use case where confidential computing would almost certainly have helped. Lots of the sort of GDPR and other similar regulation measures can be easily implemented by using confidential computing, and sometimes meaning that you don't need to do a bunch of other things because you're protected and isolated by using this. And we're seeing a number of regulators worldwide, a lot in Asia at the moment, Singapore, for instance, but also in Europe and North America, looking at how to specify using confidential computing and similar technologies to protect your data or your customers' data, frankly.
You earlier also mentioned that there are different groups. One is outreach as well. Now let's look at two ways to look at it. How organization can reach out to the consortium, and how you reach out. How does the education works both ways?
Absolutely, sure. So the way we reach out is by, doing this sort of thing, of course, working with the press and analysts, speaking at conferences, doing blogs, follow our LinkedIn. We put a lot of stuff out there, and we publish tech talks as well, which you can just watch on YouTube to find out more. So that's how we do a lot of things, a lot of events like that. In terms of how other people can get involved, well, as I said, you don't need to be a member to attend our meetings. You can attend our meetings, and we video and record most of them anyway, so that's great. You can join the consortium. We'd love to have you as a member. Go to confidentialcomputing.io. You can get lots of information, including what the benefits of being a member are, because let's say you're a startup. For a start, we're doing free membership for startups for the first 12 months, but you can do things like be on our booth. You can talk to customers when we're at conferences, have your materials put out there, work with us on some of these white papers, for instance, have your blog post cross-linked. So there's a number of ways people who want to get involved. And we have members, not just the silicon vendors, they're members. Most of the hyperscalers are members. Lots of big other companies, people like IBM and Red Hat, members, of course, Cisco, TikTok, Huawei. Very broad membership, and lots of startups and academic folks as well.
And when you talk to companies, are there any hurdles that kind of deter them from not joining but adopting the confidential computing?
It's still not a one-size-fits-all click and it happens thing. So that's something that we're absolutely working on. One of the things that's really important for confidential computing is something called attestation, which allows you to prove that it's been done right. And you do need that. And exactly how to do attestation is an interesting one in terms of what's the right business model. So we're still seeing people working out how to provide services around attestation. So it's absolutely improving, getting easier. The more people involved, the easier it's going to be, and that's part of what we're about.
And can you also talk about some of the use cases?
I was at a very large bank in the UK, a global bank, a few months ago. And they were saying, for instance, we would love to use AI more because, well, who wouldn't want to use AI, right? Fixes all the problems you could possibly have. And they said the problem we have is that it's really expensive to use in-house. We just can't afford to have that infrastructure. But a lot of the stuff that we want to do has got really sensitive data. It's about, who we're going to buy or, what strategic moves we're going to make in the marketplace. That's not stuff we can just put out in the cloud. They need to find ways to protect it. And confidential computing provides a mechanism for them to do that. They can protect not only the training models, but also the inference models. So no one can look in at the data that's being used to do the training. They can track that data to make sure that it is what is actually being used to answer the questions. And the questions and the answers are themselves also kept confidential, and the integrity is kept as well. So confidential AI is a really big topic at the moment for anyone who has sensitive data or sensitive models and particularly wants to use the cloud. Although, of course, you can use it internally and protect against insider threats too.
Can you also talk about what are the things that you folks are working on?
Yeah, so one of the big things at the moment is the question of attestation and how people should be running attestation services to prove that what you're doing is actually confidential computing, because the last thing you want to do is think you're secure when actually you're not. So there's a lot of work going on that. There's a lot of work working actually in the Linux kernel to make sure that that's all done, which is very appropriate for this conference, of course. And we're doing lots of work also on governance and regulators and compliance. So looking at it from the business side, because it's not just a security technology. This is about understanding how it changes your risk profile. And that's what people like CISOs and CFOs care about. They don't really care about security, they care about risk. And that's something that you can change how you deal with and manage risk. And that's a really important thing for confidential computing.
Mike, once again, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talk about the consortium. Thanks for great insights, and I would love to chat with you again. Thanks
very much. Next time.